Right now across our country, we are having, and in the Senate, we're having a long overdue, absolutely critical conversation about policing in America. I am very grateful over the last weeks to be in good faith conversations with colleagues of mine across the aisle about a larger bill to try to advance policing in America. But today we're here on a far more narrow topic. And the purpose of the hearing is to talk about changes we need to make when it comes to how we as an overall society are going to respond to people dealing with mental health crisis and those who are behaviorally have disabilities of behavioral health. By and large, we as a society have failed to provide these individuals with the support, services, compassion, and empathy they need to thrive in our communities and live full lives. We see our streets with people experiencing homelessness, our jails and prisons, and we see, unfortunately, short and tragic deaths of those who are struggling with mental health crises. I haven't met a warden when I go visit jails or police leaders who haven't spoke with compassion and empathy that they are not the ones that should be dealing with this. There should be a better way to help people live healthy lives. And so today we focus in on what is unfortunately too often our society's first real interaction with people with mental health, and it often goes wrong. We're here to talk about how our great police officers try to deal with this issue. It's about how we have made police officers first responders for mental illness, intellectual developmental disabilities, substance abuse, and people experiencing homelessness. It is about how officers are deeply frustrated and, as is often the case, overwhelmed because they are expected to play the role of social worker, mental health expert, and medical expert when they do not have the training or the skills often to do so. And it's about how, for this reason, these encounters can quickly escalate to violence or turn deadly. One study of shooting data for 2015 found that people with untreated mental illness were 16 times more likely to be killed during a police encounter. The names, many of which we know, of the people who've died because of their encounters: Danielle Prude, Deborah Danner, Marcus David Peters, and so many more. Often when these deaths occur, I reach out to the police officers I trust in the police department that I oversaw as a mayor. These are great, tough cops, courageous, fearless, in fact. And I ask them, should those people with mental illnesses have died in those interactions? And they all conclude with me very quickly that there should be a better way. We as a society together should be able to avoid these unnecessary deaths. Public health issues cannot be fixed with a law enforcement response. We must find a different way. What is needed for people who live with mental illness or addiction is help, services, treatment, access to medication, medical treatment, housing, peer support, and more. We know from our experiences of sound law enforcement officers, people on both sides of the aisle, that this should change in our society. We are better than this. I mentioned my time as mayor of Newark, and I have to say I was elected with a mandate to lower violent crime. My city was experiencing a surge in crime when I became mayor in 2006, so I spent hours and hours and hours riding along with police officers, often until 4 o'clock in the night. I wanted to know the challenges they faced. I wanted to learn their profession as best I could. I rode with them, and I got to know them. And again, I was humbled by their heroism and their service and their sacrifice. I got to know them and their families. I saw their professionalism. I saw how they were willing to take extraordinary risks, often putting themselves squarely into life-threatening situations to carry out their duties. Let me tell you right now, the job of being a police officer in America is extraordinarily difficult. But what made their work harder was having to answer calls for service that took them to the person in a mental distress and screaming in their home, to the teenager whose mother called 911 because he was erratic and she had no one else to call, to the person experiencing homeless, struggling with addiction, lying in the street. We were so frustrated, me and my police leadership, that the calls for service kept people chasing what we called the queue, chasing call after call, as opposed to doing the strategic work we needed to do to solve violent crimes. Unequipped and under-resourced, I saw my officers spend their nights chasing those calls when they could have been more strategically using our manpower as police. And those people who they responded to could have gotten better help that would have prevented them from having encounters with the police in the future. I want to note that I received several letters from law enforcement leaders that echoed my own experience across the country in advance of this hearing, asking, almost pleading for Congress to fix the problem. I'm going to submit those letters for the record, but I want to read just some of the words. Sheriff Jerry Clayton of Washtenaw County, Michigan, wrote, "I urge the subcommittee to support and fund additional community-based services for people with mental health and substance use challenges. Too often, people in need of treatment end up in our jails. This is not where they belong. Wherever possible, we should make efforts to find ways to provide community-based care without ever connecting with law enforcement." Chief Sean Barnes of Madison, Wisconsin wrote, in this era of police reform, we must all challenge our government to provide a better level of service to the community. We can no longer simply rely on police responses to mental wellness and must view this issue from a community health perspective. We have seen far too many times this negative results of police-only responses to mental health calls. No person deserves to be imprisoned or harmed by police simply because they have mental wellness challenges. Chief Rashal Barkney of Charlottesville, Virginia wrote, "By simply calling 911, a caller unleashes the full power of a system in which few officers are equipped to navigate. The Senate Judiciary Committee has the opportunity to inform the development of a national framework for responding to individuals in crisis. Included in that framework must be a pathway toward decreasing the presence of law enforcement in the mental health response portfolio, and for the allocation of funding and resources which build capacity to support community-led continuum of care options which incorporate lived experiences and racial equity into the system." In the meeting with local police chiefs 2 weeks ago, my colleague, my friend, and my partner in a lot of work here in the Senate, Senator Cornyn, expressed support for specialized training and more social workers and mental health experts so that police can do their jobs and, quote, "keep the bad guys at bay and protect the community." I believe we can find common ground here. I very purposely made this first hearing about something that I thought there was a wide common ground to do. There's so many issues that we as Democrats and Republicans do a good job of delineating our differences. This is something that should rise, I think, more grace from all of us. How can we come together, right and left, to try to find a way not to rehash our differences, but champion our shared interests and find common sense solutions? It's time that we go that extra step to end what for many families with someone that has a mental illness in them has been a constant nightmare, fears of what will happen to their family member. I am grateful to all the witnesses that are here. I hope today we can narrow in not on our differences, but to see if we can find some common ground. That's when we as a country move forward, is when we find ways to stand together and work together to the benefit of others. It is the calling of our country to lead with that kind of spirit. I look forward to hearing from everyone. I look forward to a constructive conversation. And with that, I am honored to pass it on to my ranking member, and someone who I have a lot of respect for, Tom Cotton.